Welcome to the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast. I am your host, Estelle Bingham, and together we'll be delving into the profound meaning of love, the driving force of purpose, and the beauty of connection that shapes the fabric of our lives. In each episode, I sit down with some of the most inspiring individuals out there to understand the ways love has touched them. Hello and welcome to Love, Purpose, Connection. My guest today is one of the most influential observers of happiness and human nature. She's the author of 7 New York Times best-selling books, including her new book that we're going to discuss today, Secrets of Adulthood. So Gretchen Rubin, welcome to the Love, Purpose, Connection podcast. It's so wonderful to have you here.
I'm so happy to have the chance to talk to you.
It's amazing. And obviously, we're here to talk about this incredible book of yours and your sort of dedication to happiness. We are constantly longing to be happy, right? It's a yearning that we have. You've chosen very specific ideas, put it in one place for us to kind of really get a handle on that, right?
Yes, these are aphorisms, so they're 1 or 2 lines in most cases, where it's some observation that I've made about how to be happier, healthier, more productive, more creative. And the idea is just sometimes 1 line is enough to just illuminate a situation or allow us to reframe something that we didn't understand. And so what I'm trying to do is write those kinds of observations, and hopefully they resonate with people. They say that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And a lot of times for me, that comes from reading. That's where I get sort of my teaching. So I wanted to write a book that aspired to that.
So with the aphorisms, some people may be familiar with an aphorism and other people may not be.
Yeah, nobody knows what an aphorism is. That's why I called it Secrets of Adulthood. Yes.
The secrets of adulthood. But, they're dotted throughout literature. They're dotted everywhere really around us. And it's actually just suddenly about noticing them. But why did you choose that? I mean, obviously, you've, as you've explained, it's to do with the simplicity often of a truth. But what led you to actually decide to work with that as a way of communicating these truths?
Well, a couple things came together at once. Well, one is like my 2 daughters were growing up, and I wanted to hand over to them the secrets of adulthood that I had learned through time and experience, usually the hard way. So I wanted to write those down. But then also I realized I needed them just as much for myself. I don't know about you, but I keep learning the same lessons over and over and over. Like, working is one of the most dangerous forms of procrastination, or it's something that can be done at any time is often done at no time. Like, I have to constantly remind myself of these truths. So I wanted to write them down. And I did. I wanted to use the form of the aphorism. As you say, this is an ancient literary form. It's the idea is that you try to crystallize some big observation about human nature into a sentence or two. And I think, first of all, it's very creatively challenging because writing short is very it's like the thing about why the sonnet inspires so much creativity, or like the 30-minute sitcom. Brevity often fosters creativity. And it also requires you to be very clear, because you can't write something very succinctly unless, at least for me, unless I really understand what I'm thinking. And that's very hard. It's very hard to really understand your own thoughts. I will often spend months and months and months thinking about something that ends up being just like a few words long. So I wanted to pass along these ideas, and I wanted to challenge myself to express them very briefly.
Right. It's like the haiku, isn't it? It's that sort of just
It's like the haiku. Exactly. Yes.
kind of really distilling a poem into this very short little offering.
Well, and then there's that old line about, I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one.
Right.
It takes a lot of work to like really crystallize what it is you're trying to express.
So let's dive in. One of the big things that stands out is, this idea of you've been studying happiness and human nature for quite some time now. And when people meet you in the street, you write about this, or they come up to you and say, okay, explain how I can be happy. You come back with the one line of, well, how do you cook an egg? So that's that sort of aphorism around there are many ways to cook an egg, and it's different for every person, right?
Yeah. What's the best way to cook an egg? And they're like, well, there can be no best way to cook an egg. And it's like, yeah, and there could be no best way to become happier because it just depends on you.
And that feels like a real theme for me because one of the chapters that I loved was this fitting in and standing out chapter. And
Oh,
I yeah, it
interesting.
that really I was that was really speaking to me, that chapter.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that because that's something that is very interesting to me, and I feel like there's not enough discussion of it. So that's intriguing to me that you found that compelling. Great.
In my practice, what I hear time and time again is this idea of not belonging and how that is so painful for all of us. This idea of, I don't know where my tribe is, or I don't belong, or I feel different. I feel so different. I feel so misunderstood. And I just felt it was this kind of real gem of a chapter, sort of this very, like you say, it's a really not really discussed as much as some of the other maybe more popular ones. But I loved this feeling of you're unique, just like everyone else.
Right. So on the one hand, you are super special, you are one of a kind, you are unique. And then on the other hand, you're a lot like other people, probably more than you realize. So both things are true. Often these are expressed in the form of a paradox because a lot of time, well, that's another secret of adulthood, which is the opposite of a profound truth, is also true. So you're unique and you're a lot like everybody else.
Yeah, it's the two truths, right, existing at the same time, which I talk about a lot. What brought you to add that chapter into this collection?
It's something that I think a lot about. It sounds like you think about it a lot because it is about belonging. It is about standing out. It is about fitting in. One of the aphorisms is like knowing when and how to conform if you want to is one of the great lessons of childhood. Because as much as people talk about nonconformity and the value of nonconformity, I think that there's a lot of value in understanding conformity and like how to get along when you want to. How do you show what you have in common with others is very important.
So what do you teach your girls about this? Because obviously, this generation are really confronted. I mean, this is the adulthood and secrets for adulthood, but that coming of age too, right? And in this society, culturally right now, how you help them with the sort of the resilience piece around this. Maybe it isn't so maybe it's just a human thing, right?
I think it's a human thing. I think it's a tension that is always within humans, which is on the one hand, we want to be different. We want to, demonstrate our individuality and make our own way and march to the beat of our own drummer. And then also we want to, just as you said, we want to find our tribe. We want to find the people that we really deeply connect with. We want to feel like there's a place for us. We feel like we want to belong. And I think that is a tension, and so that I've just talked to my daughters about the fact that there's a tension, that on the one hand, you really have to be true to your own voice and even be able to hear that voice, which sometimes it can get drowned out, as you say, by social media or the expectations of the people around you or your expectations for yourself. But then also, understand, like, well, how do I find a place with other people?
Because you talk about connection, you do talk about connection a lot. And really, we kind of come back to 2 points that I noticed in the book, which are the idea of work and, being of service in some way, working, what that looks like, your work being your joy, and how you can have fun around that or be of service or what that looks like. But also this idea of connection, this basic idea of how we as human beings operate in the world, and that finding good ways to do that will somehow help us feel happier.
Yes, I think that's exactly true, and so that's why it's a big part of the book. Yeah.
How do you connect then in your like how do you find in obviously in New York or wherever you are in the world, what do you do in order to create spaces within your life to connect more?
Well, I'm a big fan of joining or starting groups. So I'm in a book group for like a regular book group. And then I just, one of the unique or idiosyncratic things about me is I love children's literature and young adult literature. I read it as an adult. And this is a taste for literature that many people share, just like some people like mysteries or thrillers or sci fi. So I'm in two groups, actually. One group got so big we had to split. I'm in two big groups of adults. We don't talk about children at all, but we read children's literature and young adult literature. And this has given me so many friends that share my love of something very bookish, but that aren't people that I would normally see.
So Gretchen, I love the fact that you are the originator of the groups. You go in and sort of create these wonderful ways to be in connection. And I think the message probably is, if anyone watching or listening, is that if you're not that person, but to go out and find, just find that group. It's out there somewhere. Just, think about what it is that you love. Think about what it is that brings you joy, whatever it is, and, find a way of connecting in that way.
Exactly. There's so many ways to do this now because so many people are hungry for it. So whatever is something that you're interested in or would like to learn more about, if you poke around, you can almost certainly find a group. But I do think it's nice to start a group among the people that you already know. That can feel a little bit easier.
Absolutely. Hi, it's Estelle here, and I'm so excited to share my new book with you, Manifest Your True Essence, Clear Your Blocks, Find Your Joy, Live Your Truth. This is more than just a book. It's an invitation to come home to your heart. Within its pages, you'll find the guidance to reconnect with your true essence. Through gentle meditations, heart-centered practices, and soulful wisdom, you'll learn how to release old patterns, embrace your divine spark, and manifest a life filled with love, purpose, and connection. Remember, you are love, you are light, and you are infinitely powerful. So we're going just a little bit deeper now, and for this one question about frameworks, and when we force people into our framework, it hurts people. And I loved that aphorism. That was, I mean, I'm not sure I've quoted it perfectly, but I love the idea of that as the truth, because if we could just remember that, thinking about how we relate to our children, thinking about how we relate to people we know or people we meet, and our partners and ourselves, it's kind of a game changer.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I am actually a huge fan of frameworks. I love 4 categories, 2 categories. Where do you fit? I think that's really helpful. Some people say, like, if you can find me, you define me. But I think it's often very helpful to have a shorthand. Like, I'm a simplicity lover, but you're an abundance lover, and you're a night person, but I'm a morning person. And you're a finisher, but I'm an opener. So I think that can be very good. But what I do think can be very destructive is like when we try to cram people into our model, which is not to say like, well, there's many kinds of people, and maybe I'm a book person and you're a tree person when it comes to thinking about like the span of our lives, but instead saying like the best way is to be a morning person. The best people get up early and do the thing that's most important to them before breakfast. You should be like me. This works for me, therefore it must work for you. And if it's not working for you, there must be something wrong with you. You're doing it wrong. You should do it twice as hard. And then you'll see that I'm right. Or, you blame yourself. You don't have a sense of self-compassion or understanding that you might be different. You say, everybody else can get up early and do what's important to them. They don't have trouble with this. What's wrong with me? I have no self-control. I have no willpower. I'm lazy. Instead of saying, hey, there are morning people and night people. 30% of people are night people. It's largely genetic and a function of age. If you are at your most like creative and energetic later in the day, that is fine. You just have to try to organize, and we don't always have total control over our schedule, but as much as you can you organize your life with that in mind instead of saying, what's wrong with me? I should be a morning person.
So it's that idea of really meeting our perfectly imperfect beings with compassion and understanding, and meeting in the middle, which is what I love about it. I love the idea of giving permission for people to be who they are, and just meeting halfway, right?
Yes, we're so judgmental of other people and we're so judgmental of ourselves. Yeah, it's just saying like there's, one of my favorite aphorisms that I wrote is the bat, the bee, and the bird all fly, but they use different kinds of wings. And that's true. The mechanics of the way that they fly is completely different in terms of the body involved, but they can all do it. So we can all get where we're going, but we might have to be very, very different in our approach to that aim.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good aphorism. So back to this idea of work, and back to this idea of ultimately what it's all about, which, if we could kind of condense the secrets of adulthood into maybe one idea, or, this, when it comes to happiness, and we recognize we've got this thing about the egg and cooking it in different ways. But I really feel like there's a piece around work, and you talked about childhood, and play is what we do in childhood, and our work should really be that for us in adulthood. Tell us a little bit more about that.
The story that lies behind it is that Agatha Christie, when she describes in her memoir how when she was growing up, she had a very elderly nurse who couldn't really play with her. And so she would sit at her nurse's feet and she had these imaginary kittens, like this family of kittens, and she would play with the kittens. And so she said, I remember sitting at my nurse's feet and like murmuring like secret stories about the kittens. Okay, flash forward, cut to Agatha Christie and her sister love detective novels. And Agatha Christie's like, I think I could write one that's just as good. And her sister's like, oh, no, you couldn't. And so then Agatha Christie is like, I'm going to do it. Right. So then cut 2 years, like flash forward a couple of years. Agatha Christie is thinking about trying to write a detective story. And she sees three people on a train. And she says, all of a sudden, she has the idea of a story, and she takes them off the train with her in her imagination. And she says, I walked up and down the road, like murmuring to myself, just as when I was playing games with the kitchens. And this became The Mysterious Affair at Styles, which established Agatha Christie and Agatha Christie has sold more novels than anybody except like the Bible and Shakespeare. I think she's an extraordinarily successful. But it started with the kittens, playing with the kittens. So the aphorism is, as Jean Piaget, Maria Montessori, and Fred Rogers remind us, play is the work of childhood. And at its best, work is the play of adulthood. And so you see with Agatha Christie, her play as a child was the play that she did as an adult. Of course, completely adapted to her adult context. But I do think that at its best, work is the play of adulthood.
Wonderful. And that's so beautifully described and explained. And I feel like you're kind of the embodiment of that, right?
I mean, I feel so fortunate. There is not one day that I do not sit down at my computer and think, oh my gosh, I am the luckiest person in the world. I am doing exactly what I would do for fun. It is what I do for fun. Several of my books have been hooky books. This very book was a hooky book. I wrote this book as kind of a busman's holiday from writing my book, Life in Five Senses. My book, Outer Order, Inner Calm, was a hooky book from writing like Happier at Home.
Because you were a lawyer before, is that right?
Yes, I was. I started my career in law. And I actually got the idea for my first book when I was clerking for Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. So I was very far along on the early legal track.
Right. But then you were like, creativity's calling me.
Yes, I was really fortunate looking back, because I think sometimes we know we want to leave, but we don't know where we want to go. And so that's like very hard to figure out. But at that time, I was already like deep in the throat. Like something I've done my whole life is get really interested and take tons of notes about different subjects. I've done this since I was like 8 years old. So I was in the process of doing that, and finally, I was doing so much of it that I thought, wow, this is the kind of thing a person would do if they were going to write a book. And I thought, well, I could be the person to write that book. So I got a book called How to Write and Sell Your Nonfiction Book Proposal and followed the directions. But I was really lucky because it's like, not only do I want to leave, but I know where I want to go. And it's not even that I want to be a writer so much as I want to write this particular book, which did become my first book, which was called Power, Money, Fame, Sex, A User's Guide. Such a delight to write that book. But I knew that's what I wanted to do. And then there came a day where I was like, well, I'd rather fail as a writer than succeed as a lawyer at this point. So let me write the book, try to get an agent, try to get it published, and see what happens.
Wow. So I'm finding that so fascinating that you wrote a book, and then this was kind of like a side hustle. I mean, the sense of like you were writing two books at the same time almost, right?
Yes. Yeah. I will often be doing that. Yeah.
And you just multitask, you just kind of work that out.
Yeah. No, like reading and taking notes or listening and taking notes is one of my favorite things. And so I have a lot of subjects that I'm sort of in the back burner tracking, and then at a certain point it will get so big. Like my next book is going to be about dealing with the empty nest phase of life, which I am rebranding as the open door phase of life, because I could just tell that at a certain point I was like, whoa, this feels like something that I really want to spend a book exploring. Some ideas aren't that big, or some I just haven't hit that escape velocity yet. I'm still thinking about it and like trying to figure out where I would take it. I don't see a framework. I don't have a theory. I don't, an original idea that I feel like would be a book. But for something like with Project Empty Nest, there was a moment where I was like, okay, I have something to say. I want to write a book about this.
So it just emerges, and it's it's like has a life of its own at that moment, doesn't it?
I am so fortunate. I was just hanging out with some writers, and they were talking about the difficulty of committing to your next project. Especially if you're somebody where you're like usually writing nonfiction, but you're thinking about writing a novel. Like there's all these complexities. But I'm really lucky because my whatever project that I want to do is always like right on the tip of my tongue as I'm finishing up. So like say the happiness project, the minute I was finishing the happiness project, which was all about how I could make my life happier if I could. Yes, I did. Then I was like, but if there's one thing that is like that almost everybody shares with happiness, because there's very few universals, it's this idea of being happy at home. It's very hard to be happy if you're not happy at home. So I did happier at home. But then I was writing happier at home. I'm like, well, what I'm really seeing is habits, because a lot of times people know what they need to do in order to be happier, but they're just not doing it. And why aren't they getting more sleep or reading more or working on their novel or, starting a side hustle? Somehow they're having an issue with the habit. So that got me to write better than before. That was all about habits. In the course of writing that book, I saw my 4 tendencies personality framework, which divides the world into 4 categories of people. And then that's all anybody wanted to talk about. So I was like, okay, I'll write a book about the 4 tendencies. So this just kind of, so I always am afraid that that's going to stop and I'm going to be left like kind of rudderless. But so far I've always known exactly what I want to do next.
Wow, that's super inspiring, actually. Love that. Okay, good. You've given me something to really be with because I've just written a book, but there's 2 others that are floating around, and sometimes I think I can hold that, actually. I can hold all of that information, and I love to take notes from books too. And it's just about sometimes just allowing the next one to flow through you.
But I think sometimes, like for people who kind of do what you do, which sort of have 2 that they're almost juggling, or it's kind of like like there's a forking path and you sort of don't know. Sometimes people say like, you just allow yourself to stay in that indeterminate place. And then at a certain point, one of them kind of gathers steam and the other one starts to get kind of dusty.
Which brings us to that perfect aphorism about choice and the idea of, how to make a choice and, live the bigger life.
Yeah, a lot of times I find in adulthood, or probably in childhood too, like there are 2 paths that we could follow. And yet the pros and the cons seem equally balanced. So you're like, if I do this, I have all these pros, but I have these cons. If I do this, I have all these pros, but I don't have all these cons. And we just can become very paralyzed because we don't see a way forward. And so I suggest several things you can say to yourself. Like another one is step into the future. Because we tend to resist change. There's a lot of inertia in life. And so if you're trying to face a decision, you might say like, well, which decision is going to allow me to step into the future? But probably the best phrase that people find to invoke that helps with this kinds of very, very difficult decision making is choose the bigger life. What is the bigger life for you? Only you know. But often you do know what is the bigger life when it's framed that way. So anyway, it's something that just over and over, and people are like, wow, that really helped me get out of a pickle. Because it's just a real big problem in adulthood. You just like, well, should I go to grad school or not? It's like, okay, well, there's all these pros and all these cons.
It's a beautiful one-liner. It really, really is a tool. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much, Gretchen, for being here on the Love Purpose Connection podcast and sharing all of your wisdom. Before you go, I'd just love to ask you, the words love, purpose, connection, what those words evoke in you.
Happiness.
Perfect.
Yeah, because sometimes people say to me, oh, I don't care about being happy. I just want a life filled with meaningful relationships and meaningful work that allows me to put my values into the world and just to really feel like I'm there for my friends, my family, and my community. And I'm like, I think you just described a happy life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. And what a perfect way to end. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for being here.
Oh, thank you. I so enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to Love, Purpose, Connection with me, Estelle Bingham. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'd really appreciate that. And if you really liked it, then leave me a review so I can keep doing what I love, healing one heart at a time. You can also follow me, Estelle.Bingham, on Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest releases. If you feel in need of some extra guidance, then my book, Manifest Your True Essence, could be helpful. You can find it online or in any major bookshop. In the meantime, thanks again for listening, thanks again for watching, and I will join you on the next episode of the Love Purpose Connection podcast.